that's beautiful and capable of a lot of different types of beauty, but also something symbolic, simply because it's been there for so long. I look at this view of the Thames from Richmond Hill, looking out over towards Windsor, and I see something that's my present, but also an epic past experienced by millions of people. I think that potential of the magnificent Thames as something that could be inspiring is what Turner was interested in. Whether it really is inspiring or whether it's just a matter-of-fact everyday experience, well, that's the art of Turner, if he's going to raise it up to that great level or not. He painted this very scene a couple of times directly and countless times indirectly. Bits of that glinting river and those classical trees appear in many pictures by him, expressing classical themes, historical themes, or just the beauty of the everyday landscape. When he painted the picture England, Richmond Hill on the Prince Regent's birthday, using this as a backdrop, the mood then was war and peace. England had just come to the end of a 20-year war with France. Everyone, including Turner, lived in daily anxiety of invasion by the French. And now that anxiety was lifted, and it was time, as the painting appears to express, for celebration. So if I were to walk down those steps now into that image, I'd be walking into a scene capable of a multitude of different symbolic meanings. Here is Turner's painting, England, Richmond Hill on the Prince Regent's birthday. It's Turner's big public statement to the nation, showing them really what they want to see, this mood of celebration following the darkness of the war years, the war with Napoleon, now finally over. I think Turner is really bringing out all his skills learnt as a teenager when he was a scene painter. It's more the artifice side of Turner's great expressive art than the reality side. Usually there's a tension between the two. Here he's pumping up the artifice.
The meaning Turner wants to get over is the great and the good at play, symbolising hope after war. The sublime dimension is the huge scale of the landscape. Hope and play go with royalty's awesomely limitless power. Turner gives all this a tangible feeling by the exaggerated high contrast of light and shade on the distant horizon.
If you were only seeing the rather stiff party of the royals all dressed up and civilizedly celebrating peace, it would be a very different picture experience than it is with the light above. You've got the light radiating out and then seeming to be conveyed by Turner's scene painting skills on the surface of the Thames right up to the party. So a scenic view, which seems slightly artificial, is made believable by light, but also through this element of contrast, it's made very vivid and rather beautiful.
In reality, the public was not at all enchanted by royalty. They thought the Prince Regent, soon to be George IV, was fat and debauched and extravagant, but he was also their figurehead, the focus for their patriotism. Turner's idealisation of royalty was all about magically transforming the ordinary into the extraordinary and the predictable into the mysterious. Was Turner an artistic radical and a conservative royalist, or just an artist businessman hoping to get the attention of royalty and maybe gain a royal client? We can only ask. In fact, nothing is known about Turner's politics. It is known that he failed to sell this painting to anyone, and it remained in his studio till he died. There was one favourite Thames journey that took Turner much further than the places we've seen so far, right up to the Thames estuary and then along that to the Kent coast, ending up in Margate, at the time a popular holiday spot for Londoners. Turner had good memories of the place because he'd been taken here on trips as a child. After he became depressed because of his father's death in 1829, when Turner was 54, the place began to have a magnetic attraction for him.
Turner knew these streets very well because he came to Margate regularly for 20 years. The attraction was the sea, the place itself, the atmosphere, what it could do for his art. But there was also something else, and that was the attraction of Sophia Booth, the lady who ran the boarding house where Turner stayed, who he, in as far as he could love anyone, pretty much loved. They remained companions for the rest of Turner's life. He had a sort of particular relationship to her, which didn't involve him living with her all the time, but visiting her now and then between trips abroad, painting trips, where he would sort of hove in at the berth that Mrs. Booth offered. All the reports we have of her are rather snobbish, perhaps. They say that she was common, she wasn't really at the level of Turner, she was too much of an ordinary person. But what the relationship tells us about Turner is the two sides of his personality, this fantastic, poetic, visionary, romantic artist who, as a person, was rather normal, a short little gnomic-looking guy, rather earthy and in some ways perhaps a bit ridiculous. But he was certainly the man who, as far as he could, loved Mrs. Booth.
No picture exists of Mrs. Booth, but she makes a striking impression in Turner's story anyway, from the sublime to the ridiculous. The sweetly ridiculous story of a romance between a genius of art and an illiterate woman. She called him Olden, she was in fact 25 years younger than him, and he called her dear. Whatever his true feelings were for her, Turner had no doubts about the role of emotion in his art and its link to colour. For years, Turner had been interested in new scientific experiments in colour perception. First, the great discoverer of the law of gravity, Sir Isaac Newton, saw colour and light arranged in a certain way. Then the philosopher Goethe challenged Newton and saw them arranged in a different way, and claimed a direct connection between colours and human emotions. Turner's belief, following Goethe's example, in a link between colours and feelings, influenced both his own colour diagrams and also heralded the arrival in his landscapes of a new visual mood. From a sort of gentle, meditative, visual poetry in Isleworth and Twickenham to soaring, abstract tremendousness at Margate. You can see this happening in a show of Turner's work at the public gallery in Margate, named after him, Turner Contemporary.
Margate, this little seaside town at the end of the Thames estuary, becomes the taking off point for a cosmic vision. Everything real in the picture, the town itself, the sails of a yacht approaching the coast, everything real becomes dissolved in favour of a whirling ball of colour. Turner only had about 5 years left to live when he painted this. His picture, Yacht Approaching the Coast, shows him at his most in touch with himself, his most indulgent, his most in touch with his idea of cosmic meaning. This central focus of pure white, surrounded by yellow, red, green, blue, and these areas of coloured white, green white, yellow white, orange white, and that strange scratchy red that emanates from below the yacht and is seen again here, mottled over with pasty, pearlescent white. Science tells us that colour is light. Turner tells us the sun which is the ultimate source of all light, is God, which is a pretty freaky idea.
Turner didn't literally see those spectrum colours straining to get through the misty whites of the spray at Margate. He saw the reality of nature on the coast and he selected from what he saw, as he always did. But the rest he invented. He was imposing a vision of colour that came from science, making a natural scene into a new kind of almost abstract art. The big skies of the Kent coast, which Turner revered. He said there was no sky on earth more beautiful than the one over Thanet. And the flat landscape offered him lots of opportunity to capture a natural light effect we naturally associate with heightened feeling, a sunset. What do we mean when we call a sunset Turner-esque? Something like the spiritual meaning. But what do we mean by that?
I think we think of sunsets as spiritual because we think of light as affecting emotion very, very directly. There's probably very little in nature that has quite as direct an effect on emotions as changing light. And a sunset is a very dramatic light. The whole atmosphere is filled with very, very intense colour that changes quite fast. But when an artist is expressing something like those feelings through an image of the sunset, it's not just the literal fact of a sunset or the cliché of a sunset. It's all the powers that a painting, this created, constructed thing has. What is embodied in that painting is very hard to put into words, actually, and nothing like as easy or as glib as saying marvellous sunset.
A sunset in reality and a sentimental idea of the beauty of sunsets are both different to Turner's actual renditions of sunsets, which are only partly observed nature. They're also interpretation and selection, but they're also feeling. He moves the paint around to get an effect he has felt as much as he's actually seen. Turner went back and forth between Margate and London all through the 1830s. Memories of the national triumph of the battles of Trafalgar and Waterloo were fading in that decade, and public life was dominated by political squabbles, by hatred for the weakness and dishonesty of the government, and news of radicals and modernists agitating for progressive legislation. Riots regularly broke out over the price of bread. Turner, now old and eccentric, neither left-wing nor right-wing, was the solitary king of light, all its moods, its expressive powers, and the society he lived in was giving him increasingly rich material for his gifts. The modern world offered him new opportunities for a synthesis of the real and the symbolic. One day, the very heart of government gave him a great subject, and the kind of light he chose to express it was all-consuming radiance.
You're looking at something violent and horrific, but also awesomely spectacular, so you can't tear your eyes away. The burning down of the Houses of Parliament. This is an event that actually happened on the night of October the 16th, 1834. For some unknown reason, both houses, the House of Lords and the House of Commons, caught fire. Within a few hours, each was reduced to a pile of smoking rubble. Turner actually witnessed that event. These are his watercolour evocations of a sort of series of glimpses of what it was like. He rushed down there to the shore with students from the Royal Academy. They hired a boat, rowed out into the middle of the Thames, and Turner made a lot of pencil sketches of what he was